Let's make a mesh bag. Now this bag can be made for either laundry purposes or produce or anything actually. It's just got mesh on the outside with a zipper top. We're preparing our 4 strips of folded fabric for the inside and outside of the top of the bag. So the zip will be sandwiched in between these pieces. So will the mesh be sandwiched in between them. So what we do is we grab a strip, press it firmly, create a crease, then we iron the raw edge to the center of that crease. Okay, and with magic we can actually make up the other pair very quickly. So these are the outside ones and these are the inside ones. Right, let's go to our hoop. In our hoop we have some tearaway stabilizer which has been pinned and hoop taped into place. And we're creating 2 placement lines for the folded edges of the first set of strips. Now, so it's wrong side up, so that's where the actually ironed raw edges are. So it's wrong side up. We have a folded edge against the edge of the placement stitching lines. And let's just put these together with some washi tape so they don't move around. The idea of this is, so we're going to stitch these down across the ends of them first, across the ends of them, just to keep those ends closed because they'll get in the way. And then we're going to create our placement lines for our zip to sit in between. Okay, so those strips are attached to the stabilizer. Let's take our washi tape off and then put our zip in between the 2 placement lines that we've just stitched. Tape it into place so it's right side up, so you can see the stopper at the top. And we'll just use washi tape to keep that closed, and then just make sure you know where that zip puller is. Just make sure that it stays in place. You know where it is. There's no chance of it being under the needle. Let's stitch our zip down, and we're stitching in the same direction so as it makes for a better zip placement. Okay, I've taken the washi tape off. So the idea is now that, so this is the underside, and we're going to sandwich our mesh bag squares in between this bottom layer, which we've actually already stitched into place, and then we're just going to put the top layer on top, so they'll be sandwiched. So the mesh is the filling in the sandwich, so as to speak. Let's just place this on the in from the edge of the folded strips. It sits in about 1/2 inch. Just carefully put that into place. Slow your machine down a little bit if you can for this there, because the mesh tends to walk a little bit. So it's just stitching the mesh bag to the edge of these strips. Let's take our washi tape off and place our first top strip. Be good if I actually put the tape on the right side. So going across, stitching down through all layers, and then stitching up the edge of the zip. I'm using the end of the pink thing to actually make sure that fabric sits in close to the zip. If you've got a pattern like I've got on my top layers, if you've got a pattern, just make sure that that pattern is even and it's sitting well. Okay, the second section done. So there, basically, that is sandwiched. The zip sandwiched and the mesh is sandwiched. Now, what we want to do is we want to just trim away the stabilizer only. I just go past that basting line. Just pull that thread out. Do this on both sides. Be careful not to get the fabric. You only want to be taking out the stabilizer. Now, it is tear away, but I'm just a little bit hesitant about just ripping that away. I want the work to still be having a good grip in the hoop while we do this pattern. So we're stitching our detailed pattern on both sides. There we go. Now I have to mention that we haven't put the elastic strip in between the two layers of fabric on top of the zip and before we put that second layer of fabric on. We didn't do that in this case. It is optional. That little elastic tab is to hold the zip stopper or the zip tab into place while it's in the washing machine, and so it doesn't flap around and make a noise and get tangled up on other things. So if you were going to put it in, you would put it in before you put the top layers of those two fabric strips on. You would actually put it in there, and it comes in about 1 inch from the edge. And all it does is hold the stopper, the puller, the tag, into place so it doesn't bang and clatter around. So let's take this out. And you can see I've used hoop tape, very sticky. But that's what it's for. It's to keep your stabilizer in place. Now just rip our stabilizer off. Undo the zip, and I undo the zip and pull that away. And I pull all the little pieces I can away from that. Now it's a little bit tedious, but get as much as possible off this. Right, so we're at the machine. Now pattern side is the outside of the bag. So we want to put wrong sides together, right sides on the outside. And what I do is I just put a couple of clips along the top of the teeth of the zipper so as it keeps everything flat. And it's not going to go anywhere, but it just makes sure that stays nice and even, because the zip, the way it's been put in, can rock forward or rock back, and you can get a longer length at the hem of this mesh. We don't want that. See, there we go. So we want to try and match the bottom line of those two the pairs of fabric strips. We want to try and match those. That's our matching point. Then we just put some clips around the outside edge, and we're going to sew around the outside edge with a 1/2 inch seam. Reinforce that, run across the top of the zip. So we're working on the outside of the bag. This is the finished side, but we're working on the outside. So we're sewing our seam around the edge, a 1/2 inch seam around the edge. Now I haven't reinforced that corner, I just lost my place of my 1/2 inch. There we go. Round the corner, across the bottom, then up the other side. Keep those edges even. Now your mesh bag can be as long as you want to cut it, as long as it's the right width to match those tabs, those strips at the top. It can be as long as short as you want. It's up to you. Right, so that's all fixed. So we've stitched that seam on the outside. So it's wrong sides together, and we've stitched that seam. Now let's trim back to 1/4 inch. So that's 5 or 6 mils for us in metrics. Trim our seams because we're going to be making a French seam. Now a French seam hides the raw seam inside a second seam. So it seems a silly thing to say, but it does. It hides the raw seam. So French seam is very, very common in dressmaking and couture because it doesn't involve an overlocker or serger. So right, we want to open the bag up. And we want to push those corners out. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually sew another 1/2 inch seam once the bag has been turned through to the wrong side. And that's what will hide our raw edges. So for the mesh doesn't really fray, but if you were going to use something else like netting or organza or even fabric, then it will fray. So let's do the technique so as it's for all fabric. So we want to just sew in, and again, another 1/2 inch in from the outside edge, which we've trimmed back and turned through to the wrong side. So the wrong side of the bag is facing us at the moment. Just ensure that our folded edges of our seams are even. Now see, the seam is hiding inside that seam allowance because it's been trimmed back to 1/4 of an inch and we're sewing a 1/2 inch seam, so it's hiding. It's a great finish, very secure, great for lingerie and great for soft furnishings. It's a great finish, it really is. So back tack firmly. And so that's all nice and neat. Now, our bag can be complete at this stage if you want to have square corners, if you want to just have the normal pushed out corners. Okay, so let's pull that corner out. So that is complete. But if you want to have a box corner, you can do it in one of 2 ways. The simple way is just basically sewing across the corner on the inside of the bag, which is the most simple way. But it does show the corner fabric in the corner, which is quite acceptable. Otherwise, we could do it the way we have in the notes. We trim that corner off on the inside, and we went to the outside again. We're setting our seam on seam, so one seam is sitting in one direction, one seam is sitting in the other, so as the seams on each other, they sit on top. That reduces bulk. We want to sew across the corner. Now this is working on the outside of the bag on this corner. Trim it back. So that's on the outside. Okay, you can see the outside pattern. Trim it back to 1/4 of an inch. Turn it on the inside and sew your 1/2 inch seam, and that's a French corner, a French seamed box corner. So all our seams are enclosed. It's just got a little bit more finesse because it's actually got all nice and even with the seams as opposed to seeing the triangular bulk which just sits on there. It's up to you. It makes no difference. It is just visual. Gives a nice little boxy corner. Now, if we had that piece of elastic sitting in between those layers of fabric, now it goes on top of the zip and under the first layer of, under the outside layer of the strip. So if we had that there, all that would be doing is it stops the little zip tab puller thing from knocking around inside the laundry and getting caught on something. Hope you enjoyed that.